Audio Jungle.
Okay, good evening, Toronto. I'm Julian Yim, and tonight's In Your Neighborhood session, we tackle a raising concern that's affecting our children, being physically inactive. With us today, we have a panel of guests from across the city, all enlightening us of this growing concern. Firstly, we have Ben, a Driftwood Public School physical education teacher. Elahe, Driftwood Public School principal. Emma, a community nurse for Toronto. Dr. Carries, a pediatrician in Toronto. Emily, the MVP of Toronto. Audrey, a parent in the Driftwood community. And Brittany, a student attending Driftwood Public School. Emma, why don't you lead us in the discussion on this important issue?
Thanks, Julian. It appears today that in the education system, there's much focus on preparing children for their future careers, as well as shaping children into respectable members of society. With this in mind, funding and resources are being spent on promoting education, which leaves little to be given to physical activity.
I agree, Emma. In my practice, I see a wide range of children, and during the initial discussion, I always ask about school and activities, and responses I get tend to show that schoolwork is demanding and physical activities are absent.
Elahe, as a principal, would you care to weigh in on this?
Thanks, Julian. Yes, it does appear that our educational system is focusing more on academia than physical activity, but it's not completely ignored. As of the year of 2012, TDSB passed a budget of that had $100 million of cuts, and they cut 200 secondary school jobs, 134 office staff, as well as operational care and maintenance. And most importantly, the TDSB cut $2.5 million from outdoor education program, which includes our physical activity programs. So although it appears that our educational system is focusing more on academia than physical activity, but it's because we are forced into this stream to be actually more focusing on academia, and without the funding, we can't provide the services that we should.
Oh yes, indeed, these cuts are significant. So what about the funds specifically for your school?
Although it appears that Driftwood has actually a large budget, in reality that the general per pupil allocation is $96.50, which that has to cover that classroom supplies, textbook and subscription, and furniture, equipment repair, desk and computers, and admin fees, field trips, prizes, printing costs, and internet, and at last is for sport programs. And the budget allocation that our school receives does not allow us to have different types of school sports at our schools, such as basketball or football, since they are very popular and everyone loves those sports. And even though our facility offers basketball court, we don't have enough budget to bring a coach from outside to teach our team how to play basketball or any other sports. And also we have a great prep teacher at the school, but we cannot afford to pay for extra hours for after-hour program to pay for those. As I mentioned earlier, the allocation has to cover many expenses, such as the ones I already listed for you. And from what I have already from the budget, dividing the money between different parts of the school programs, it leaves us with a small budget for physical activity. And also many sports require traveling to different courts, such as football, and that's extra cost that we cannot afford to have. And of course the Black-Queer community is a high-need area. As much as many parents want their children to be involved in physical activity, we cannot afford to ask them because it's really it's a high expense for them. And also some sports such as hockey or football or basketball, they require shoes or some apparel that also goes beyond our school budget, and we cannot afford that. Another issue that we are facing right now is the safety issue, that some sports are dangerous, and we don't have a nurse at our school in case of emergency or accident.
Thank you, Elahe. You raised some strong points. We'll touch back on safety in a moment. But Ben, as a gym teacher, do you think that schools do enough to set up physical activity programs?
No, I don't, because right now the school curriculum is really overloaded. A lot of the teachers are under a lot of pressure, especially the ones that have to teach split grades. It's difficult for us to find the extra time to do something active with the kids. Schools also tend to prioritize other subjects over gym class. And there isn't enough guidance for me to implement physical education lessons and grading. Programs like math, English, and social studies are far more extensive and comprehensive. The provincial curriculum for physical activity is vague, and this makes it difficult to measure performance. The expectations are very clear and concise in other subjects. There's also a lot of added pressure from the parents and the school for the kids to perform well in EQAO. Teachers are encouraged to spend more time on math and writing at the expense of gym class and arts. Typically, parents are also a lot more concerned about those subjects too. Gyms are often too small, equipment is lacking or poorly maintained, physical activity cannot be performed in classrooms because they are too overcrowded. Phys ed is usually the first subject to be cancelled when there is a school-wide event. The gymnasium is in need for an assembly. Teachers are wary of taking their students on off-site events, like the park or neighborhood walks, due to the threat of litigation.
Well, how about setting up after-school programs if there isn't enough time during the school day?
Well, that's really hard to do because, as Aleha mentioned, we don't have a lot of money for that. I am responsible for 20 to 30 kids. It's hard for me to try to control and organize that large group. A lot of time I spend trying to establish control, and then also I need to teach these kids a skill on top of that. It takes like 5 to 10 minutes to get these kids organized, and then I have about another 10 to 15 minutes to try to do an activity with them. And it takes 5 to 10 minutes to get them ready to leave.
So that aside, if we were able to provide enough staff, would the students be engaged? Brittany, as a current student at Driftwood, what do you think?
I think it all depends if we had better equipment in our gyms and everyone participated, like the other students too. And right now at my school, we're all taking turns using equipment, but not everyone really cares. Half the class just sits on the ground and doesn't even play the sports. And if everyone was involved, it would be a lot more fun. But we need more sports equipment.
Great. How about activities outside the school?
I would like to participate in more activities outside the school, but I mostly enjoy playing outside. But my neighborhood doesn't have a lot of facilities, recreational facilities, skateboard parks for the boys or basketball courts. And sometimes I'm nervous to go outside and play because with my friends because I don't feel safe in my neighborhood.
I saw on the news that there were burglaries and people have been shot close to where I live. That's scary. And we don't have the money for me to get involved in sports or even swimming. And what fun is it when all my friends are at the mall anyway? I wouldn't want to even play sports unless some of my friends did, and no one really wants to anymore. Facebook and video games are much
Thanks,
more fun.
Brittany. I can see that the barriers for you are real. It's unfortunate that the schools can't afford enough equipment for everybody, but the blame can't entirely fall on our education system. We can't always hold our teachers responsible for not engaging our children in physical activity. I think parents need to take initiatives as well. So Audrey, as a parent, how do you feel?
I agree, Julian, but it isn't easy. Sports are so expensive. Even for my son to play minor house league level hockey, it will cost our family upwards of $1,500 for the year. That is money we just don't have. My nephew is playing AAA hockey currently, and his costs are close to $10,000. It's astronomical. We're typically living week to week with funds, and unfortunately $1,500 is not something that we have at our disposal. My daughter has shown an interest in soccer. Sure, it's cheaper than hockey, but when you've got 3 kids, the administration fees alone are now up to $300, and that's before equipment. And what if my child doesn't even enjoy the sports? I've wasted all that money for them to drop out halfway through. If only the school were able to expose our children to a wide range of sports that we could try out before actually being interested. With our income, it's nearly impossible to enroll our children in physical activity outside of school.
Well, physical activities don't necessarily mean just organized sports. What about other options for your kids, like swimming or skiing?
I would love my children to be able to experience winter sports like skiing, but again, it's just too expensive. the rentals, the costs, the lessons, and even the cost for gas consumptions are just too much for us now. We just had to tell our children that they won't be able to participate in swimming lessons this spring as well. My husband was recently laid off, and we just can't afford it. Every activity at our local recreation center is just too much for our budget when we have 3 kids. How do you get to decide who gets to go swimming this month and who doesn't? It just isn't fair. And time, we just don't have time. Those are hours my husband and I could be working. And with the way our community is right now, I don't know if it is entirely safe to let them attend on their own. And without health insurance, we can't afford expensive medical costs. If one of my kids were to get hurt.
Income and social environments are obvious concerns. Maybe Emily, as the MPP of Toronto, can comment on this.
Thanks, Julian. Costs for organized sports are expensive. There's no denying that. But recently in Toronto, we found ways to make recreational activities more accessible for children, especially parents like Audrey that can't afford to do physical activities with their children. Recently, Toronto's made recreational activities free for 23 centers across Toronto, and in the fall, we'll be making 16 more recreational facilities free as well in low-income areas such as Driftwood. These will include Scarborough to North York and even Etobicoke. I think the big picture here is not only cost of the income facilities, but the social and physical environments as well. Like Brittany touched on, with the equipment not being safe or enough of the equipment, that's a big problem too. We're working hard to make the Driftwood area feel safe for everyone, but it's hard. Regardless of how social economic status is measured based on education, income, or occupation, or even the area of residence, studies repeatedly find that low social economic status groups do not do sufficient recreational activity to benefit their health. We have also found that low-income areas coupled with low education and literacy rates correlate to high crime rates. And this is a problem facing Driftwood. Sure, we can make all these facilities accessible, but will the children even engage in them, even if they're accessible? What if they're too scared to leave their homes? Most children feel safe at home, where they have video games and their computers. Why risk your safety? And if your parents say don't go outside, why risk it if you can socialize on the computer?
Valid point, Emily. It does appear that the cost is not the only concern here. Compliance on behalf of the children and the parent is also important. Now, many parents don't see the problem with their children socializing, as Emily put it, electronically. So, Dr. Carries, maybe you can weigh in on this, on the health consequence of being physically inactive in the childhood.
Sure, Julian. Being physically inactive is a major concern facing our children these days. Of course, obesity is the first concern that everyone thinks of. Being physically inactive leads to burning fewer calories. But what goes on when you're sitting in front of the TV or the computer? Typically, you're snacking, and usually it's on high-sugar, high-calorie foods. So couple an inactive child with a child who eats high-sugar, high-cal foods, and you've painted a pretty picture of obesity. And what else can this lead to? Cardiovascular disease, diabetes, hypertension, and the list goes on and on. There's been a direct correlation between income level and physical activity. Low-income people suffer disproportionately from health problems related to physical inactivity. People from households with incomes below $15,000 are more likely to be diagnosed with diabetes or asthma, to be obese, and to be at risk for health problems related to lack of exercise than people from households above $50,000. People from households with incomes below $15,000 are 3 times more likely to live a sedentary life than people from households with incomes above $50,000. Only 17.6% of people from households earning less than $15,000 report achieving the recommended levels of physical activity, and 39.5% report no leisure time activity at all, and we consider those people sedentary. Studies have found that we may have actually reached a stage where children will not outlive their parents, and we may actually see a decline in the life expectancy of Canadians. We have shown in studies that increased physical activity in the schools alone will not combat obesity. We need our children to be engaged outside of school as well. But being physically active is not the only way to address this, and we need to look at the compounding factors, the big picture, in relation to childhood obesity and its partner disparities.
Emma, as a community nurse, perhaps you have something to add to this.
Yeah, Dr. Carries is right. We need to target the entire problem and not just one component. And we need to look at the sources as well. Parents are playing a huge role in influencing the children on what is appropriate and what isn't. The TV has become the babysitter, and the drive-thru has replaced Saturday night dinners. Parents play such an important role in shaping their child's future. Instilling healthy habits at a young age can also help us as we get older. According to Public Health Agency of Canada, 30 minutes for 4 times a week is enough and can be built into a family's daily routine by doing simple things, just helping shovel snow, raking leaves, sweeping, or doing chores, or even if they are just watching on TV, if they get up and do some stretching every hour. In Canada, and more specifically in Toronto, we face another challenge, which is that we have a wide range of cultures. It's beautiful to see so many different cultures coming together, but sometimes these different cultures can add to the problem of low activity and poor nutrition. In my practice as a community nurse, I'm finding that more and more families are restricting their child's activity in the winter months due to fear of it being too cold, and it's unsafe. And these are usually minority populations with these concerns. Also, the cultural diets sometimes are not the most nutritious, and it's hard to change tradition and to voice concerns to people who do not believe that change is necessary. Like, they believe they're feeding the children the best that they can. Also, we need to look at everything from culture and education to income to environment and everything else in between when combating this issue.
So lack of physical activities can cause a multitude of problems, both long-term, short-term, and medium-term.
We need to combat the negative health conditions such as obesity and cardiovascular disease by focusing on problems such as low physical activity.
We need to widen our approach and look at the compounding factors related to low physical activity, and such as low income, social status, culture, physical environment, social environment, education, and literacy.
We need to educate our children as well as our families on being physically active and living a healthier lifestyle, while also taking into account the barriers they face to achieve these.
Providing safe, affordable, recreational activities for families, as well as educating them on eating right and proper nutrition, we can take an upstream approach and hopefully prevent conditions like cardiovascular disease and diabetes in children.
Coming together as a community, we can make the facilities more accessible and affordable for everyone and help spread the word on proper nutrition and activity.
And make sure that the environment is safe for our children to engage in their activities.
By raising awareness and advocating for our community and empowering all those involved, we can get a step closer to achieving health for all.